All right. Hello, friends, and welcome back to a little bit more of the Cage of Roses demo. A lot of stuff has happened since our episode 1 for this. For one, I found out, as I've been pronouncing her name as Meike, it is actually like Meike? Supposedly, I looked up how to pronounce it after I finished playing, and a lot of people were saying it was similar to Meike. So, sorry, Meike, for pronouncing your name wrong for an hour. As well, the demo is now officially out for everybody to play, so you can, play this as well and see for yourself this game. I'm very intrigued by where it's going. Last episode we didn't see the other main character, the love interest, the vampire lady at all. And so I'm interested in seeing, especially in this episode, is she going to appear? Are we going to see a little bit of her? How's her introduction? All of that. So let's just get into it, because I want to see her. Oh, okay. Meike and Henny sat in their cell for what could have been minutes or hours, or even days, whiling away the time. My God, there was so much time, with continued, unending, incessant games of Joker. Meike's heart was not in the game, her head being otherwise occupied, and Henny trounced her soundly, 12-1. Henny was better than Meike at card games in general, so this came as little surprise. Meike was accustomed to losing, and accepted her failures with good grace. There were more important things in life than card games. And in any event, Meike had never cared for the jokers in Henny's deck. She preferred to be rid of them. Little of note happened during these dead, empty hours. Nobody came to visit Henny and Meike in their cell, and the faint screams both women had heard, though Meike was staunchly determined to think of it as the wind, did not see fit to impinge upon their solitude. The sky beyond their present cell, meanwhile, remained dark, like a bereaved widow outfitted in mourning clothes. The cold remained oppressive, the stone floor uncomfortable, and Meike found little in the way of relief, no matter how much she shifted. Meike had just begun to wonder in a detached way, as Henny launched into their 14th round of Joker, whether they would ever meet the rescuer. Perhaps whoever had hauled them from the forest had done so not as an act of kindness, but as a means of prolonging their suffering. Maybe they meant to keep them locked in the cell alone until time itself slowed to a trickle, then ceased, the squalid stone walls tumbling down about them to crush their emaciated corpses in the debris. But soon, shockingly soon, or so it seemed despite all the interminable waiting, Meike found her hypothesis proved wrong. She could hear, above the sound of Henny shuffling the deck, a sound. Footsteps. The footsteps were soft enough at first that Meike wondered whether she had even imagined them, but as the seconds elapsed, they became louder still, until even Henny heard them. Goodness me. Henny fumbled with the cards, then threw them down face up, red hearts and black spades spilt across the stone. Can you hear that, Meike? Yes, I can. Somebody must be coming. A rescuer from the woods, don't you think? They could be our rescuer, yes, but maybe. Meike did not finish this thought. Her saliva felt too thick in her throat, like tar, and she shivered. She did not want to extinguish the hope which she could see flickering now in Henny's eyes. That would have been cruel. Henny's head swiveled to the grated iron door, excitable as a puppy, and wide-eyed she peered through the shadows. As it turned for the better, I was beginning to wonder they'd forgotten all about us. Can't wait to come face to face with them. I'll be sure to tell them exactly what I think about their so-called hospitality. You said that once before, Henny, and I wish you wouldn't. I don't want to anger them. Oh, stuff and nonsense. I'm sure it will be fine. If they wanted to harm us, they had plenty of chances to do it already, surely. That is true, but... The footsteps drew closer still, echoing about the stone walls, echoing too inside Meike's skull. The footsteps could represent only two things. They would mean salvation if they were lucky, but Meike found it difficult to believe this. Neither she nor Henny had been very lucky that night, despite Henny's continued winning hands and Joker. It seemed far more likely that these footsteps would bring about yet more suffering. And sure enough... Well, would you look at what the cat dragged in? The voice that cut through Meike's musings was a proud, haughty one, the syllables polished to perfection, like cut glass. The voice belonged, quite obviously, to a woman, and given her pronunciation, she must have been well bred. Perhaps the rescuer, too, was a lady, a von such-and-such, as Meike was, from a family whose ancestral home was vast and old and grand enough to have its very own dungeon. Whereas most nobility used their subterranean storage spaces for wine cellars, this family seemed to prefer taking prisoners. The thought did not fill Meike with much confidence about her mysterious rescuer. Anxiously, she glanced up to meet the source of said voice, and when she did... Oh! Meike could not help but gasp in surprise. Woman, that was a cool entrance. Oh my god, can I see it again? That was really cool. Being able to, she came from the shadows and, walked up to the door. That was really cool. I like that a lot. Hold on, do it again. Wow. Okay. The owner of that voice, who now stood upon the opposite side of the cell's door, was not at all what Meike had imagined. She was shorter than Meike had expected, shorter than Meike herself, who was dwarfed by her wealthier, significantly older fiancé, and slender with it, her cheekbones high, her neck not dissimilar to the stem of a flower, okay? Her skin was frighteningly pale, like that of a corpse, and beneath her eyes Meike could see dark rings, similar to those she often sported during the long nights at her bedroom window, unable to sleep. The woman, or was she a girl, had hair so fair it was almost white, which almost seemed to glow in the moon's light. Her hair was not worn, as most women did, and I still don't know how to pronounce that style of hair, but instead was loose. It tumbled about her shoulders in waves, all disarrayed, in a manner which would have made Meike's mother swoon from the sheer impropriety of it all. The girl's appearance, but was she a girl? Was striking, not only because of her indeterminable age, but because of her eyes, widely spaced, and fringed with the most luxurious of lashes. Her irises were not brown like Henny's, nor blue like Meike's. They were not green, nor hazel, nor gray, nor any of the other shades Meike had seen in the faces of her family's servants, and the attendants at the boutiques to which her mother took her, and the congregation at her local parish. Her irises were, instead, bright red, so much so they bordered on the visceral. These lovely irises were even redder than the blood which had seeped from Meike's sliced cheek, which had now congealed and seemed full of violence. The girl was a perfect stranger to Meike, but her eyes told more than pleasant chit-chat ever could. She was not normal. Damn, okay. Meike knew instinctively, as she gazed upon her, that she should keep her distance, if she could, but this only made her, conversely, feel even more enchanted. Ooh. She could not look away from her. It was as though her captor had placed her under a spell. That woman. Henny shifted back, her skirt shifting against the ground. She's the one I told you about, Meike. The one from the woods. She's the one who fought off those bandits. I thought it was unbelievable what I saw, but now I know it wasn't a dream. She really is real. She killed all those men. She's a monster. A monster? Meike murmured this under her breath, her expression one of perplexity. And had he delivered this indictment against any other, Meike would have thought her guilty of exaggeration, but she could believe such a claim easily enough when leveled at this woman. The woman did not look as monsters did in fairy tales, with slobbering maws and sharpened claws, but her red eyes made Meike's blood run cold, regardless. She was no ordinary woman, but perhaps that was to be expected. Nothing about the night's events had been ordinary. "Oh, a monster, am I?" The woman's unnatural eyes narrowed and, with a smile, said, "You cut me to the quick, you humans do. At least you would, were I not so accustomed to it. Perhaps I bring it upon myself, given the unusual manner in which I treat my guests, but you could at least try to be polite. Why, if it were not for me, the both of you would be lying in the woods right now, mangled beyond all recognition. So you really were the one who saved us. I thought as much. Yours isn't a face anybody could forget in a hurry." "Why, thank you. I will take that as a compliment. I am very striking, I know." "Why did you save us, though? And how?" "I can't believe you brought us back here, wherever here is, on your own. You must have had help." "Oh, if only, but alas, I've not had any help for, well, let's see. It must have been a century, at least." "A century?" And he gawked at the woman, her eyes agog. "But that would make you older than my grandmother. That can't be right. You don't look a day over 18. "Oh, do you really think so? You're too kind." Laughing softly, the woman extricated a key from her pocket, then inserted it into the awaiting keyhole. "Hey, welcome to the party. You're in here with us. Woot woot." Deftly she turned it, and deftly she stepped inside the cell, the hem of her dark cape dragging against the uneven stone floor. Once inside the cell, she turned to pull the door open, and locked it anew. "Okay. There, that ought to do it. It would be horribly tedious if you tried to run from me. I would be able to catch you, of course, but I'd rather not bother with all the fuss. Such a hassle." With the door thusly secured, she placed the key inside her pocket and turned to look at her prisoners. For that, Meike knew, with a sinking feeling, was what she was. Meike had been aware of her status upon waking in her dank prison cell, but the presence of the woman, and how very aloof she was, made this abundantly clear. She had not been brought back to this woman's abode as an equal. She was at the woman's mercy, Von Essen or no, and Meike feared her family's prestigious title would have little sway here. The woman did not seem like one who cared for such things. She did not seem like one who cared much for anything, really, or even about anything. Her lips might have been curved into a coy smile, like one who had been dealt a particularly good hand in a card game, but her red eyes were hard and horribly empty. Meike could tell on an instinctual level that this woman was not one to be trifled with. Why, she might not have been a woman at all. "Now, why are you looking at me like that?" The woman, catching Meike's cowed expression, pouted. "You're making me feel quite unwelcome. I thought you would be relieved to see my face after being left to languish in the catacombs of my castle for hours on end, but maybe I was hoping for too much. In any case, you shouldn't frown like that, dear. It's an awful waste. You'll wrinkle your pretty face." This chastisement was familiar to Meike. She had heard it many times from her mother. While Meike had been trained to obey her mother without question, however, it was not so with this strange woman. Some of her reticence fell away, and, needled, Meike said, "Oh no. What I do with my face is my own concern. I'm sure it's none of your business." My. The mysterious woman tittered. "You're feistier than you look. I took you for a shrinking violet, but maybe I was mistaken. You might make for quite the amusing plaything, though you'd be such a good sight prettier if you smiled. I can't say I blame you for being so surly, though. I never liked smiling on command either, though it's been many, many years since anyone last tried to give me orders. It's fortunate no one can tell me what to do now, at least. Came at quite the price, but... oh well, never mind. Where are my manners? My name is Magdalena, but you may call me Lena. My family's name, meanwhile, is of no particular importance. They might have commanded some respect back in the day, but it is not so now. They have long since been obliterated. I doubt history will remember them. It would not wish to. I am all that is left of their legacy, a fact I would very much love to rub in their faces, but alas, I never got the chance. It's very nice to meet you for the second time this night. So saying, Magdalena dropped a neat curtsy, taking hold of her cape in lieu of a skirt. But I am afraid I will not be afforded much of a chance to properly know you. While I would relish the chance to speak to a couple of young maidens such as yourselves, I have designs for you beyond idle chatter. And what do you mean by that, exactly? Only that, now that I've brought you here, I cannot continue to let you live. You've already seen too much. What? And he stared at Magdalena with wide eyes, so full of fear the air swelled with it. What do you mean? What I said. Do try to keep up. It's awfully tedious having to explain myself down to the finer details. But I suppose you have the right to know the bare minimum, prisoners though you may be. I would hate to keep you in suspense, and at this point it matters not how much you know. You will not be able to tell anybody else what you might learn here. You'll not be venturing forth beyond the walls of my castle ever again. Magdalena smiled, her lips lifting in a wicked grin, not so very unlike that of the Joker in Henny's pack of cards. Though Magdalena's face was white, her lips were red, much like her eyes. They stood out in her milky face, like a rose blooming despite the winter's chill. Or else, Meike thought with a shudder, freshly spilt blood. You must understand that I am not a normal woman. No human can hope to best me when it comes to a competition of sheer strength, as the bandits who were pursuing you soon discovered. It did not take me more than a few seconds to dispatch them. The fight they put up was so pathetic. Makes me wonder why they even bothered. If they'd have any respect for my time, they would have slit their own throats with their daggers and saved me the trouble. You humans can be so awfully thoughtless. But if they had done that, I wouldn't have been able to bring the leader of their little group back to my castle. He was in a bad way, and I was obliged to introduce myself to him before bestowing upon you similar honors. I really must apologize for making you wait. Magdalena dropped another curtsy, as an elegant lady might, but it smacked of insincerity. There was no respect in Magdalena's red irises for her pair of prisoners. Rather than sympathize with their plight, she, instead, seemed little more than amused. How many men and women had Magdalena brought to her castle, and how many had she summarily tortured? Meike knew of at least one, besides herself and Henny. The bandit's leader. Did you kill him? Eventually, yes. It was quite the sight. You ought to have seen the way he begged and pleaded and groveled at my feet. A grown man like that, who was practically made of muscle. Oh, how fickle fortune is. Just 1 hour hence he was the predator, stalking his prey through the woods alongside his lackeys, and the next. Magdalena drew a hand across her neck in the unequivocal, universal gesture of a slit throat. Well, what goes around comes around. He got what he deserved, and his screams really were exquisite. Did you perchance happen to hear them? He was being rather loud. Penny gave a violent start at this, but said nothing sensible. Her mouth fell open, but only syllables came out, all broken up and interspaced. What? Oh goodness. Surprised, are you? You shouldn't be. That man was a bandit, a vulture in a man's flesh who profited on misery. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have gone the same way as the poor unfortunates in that stalled carriage. The driver and the horses, too. Nobody was spared their ravages, man nor beast. They made quite the grisly mess. Were I a century younger, it would have been enough to turn even my stomach. Maybe that is so, but to gloat over another death like that, it doesn't seem right. You're twisted. If I am twisted, that is only because this world... Magdalena began, but then paused. A momentary furrow captured her white, smooth brow, but soon it straightened out, as though nothing of note had occurred. Well, never mind that. I do not wish to spout cliches about good and evil. I would begin to bore myself. The fact of the matter is, that man got what he deserved, as did his compatriots. I took great pains to ensure that. I paid that brigand back twofold for what he did to you. Did you know that he tried to be stoic in the beginning? Humans often are. Human males in particular. They have so much pride. It's funny, really, that a cur like that would care so much about appearances. He was less a man than he was a dog, but he still had pretensions of greatness, or of grandeur. I soon stripped him of these lofty delusions, however. Humans are very alike in one regard, at least. You all scream the same after your bones have been broken, and you all bleed red. That man was a brigand, I'll admit, who deserved the hangman's noose, but that's for a court of law to decide, not you. What you did isn't justice, it's barbaric. You shouldn't be taking pleasure in other people's deaths. What gave you the right to kill him, anyway? I had every right to kill him. He was trespassing upon my land, as were you and the young lady here. His life was already forfeit the moment he encroached upon my territory. The Lord's Prayer may say that we ought to forgive those who wrong us, but I have no patience with such teachings. They do not apply to me. The Lord has forsaken me. I am no longer a member of his congregation. He would have no love for me as I am now, and I have little love for him. I cannot conceive how he could let me suffer so, if he truly existed. Sometimes I do wonder. So you mean to add blasphemy to your list of crimes? Oh, I've done far, far worse than that in my time. The morals of you good, sententious churchgoers do not apply to me. I'm not of your kind. I'm a drinker of blood who walks the night. I've been alive for over a century, though my life is very different to yours and your mistress's. I doubt that you could understand me, and neither do I want you to. I've no desire to understand you, either. There would be no point. We are much too different. A drinker of blood? But that would make you... a vampire? It was Meike who offered forth this label after Henny's voice faltered. Meike was an ardent devourer of books, and she had read before of such a shadowy denizen of the night, much to her mother's chagrin. Lady Von Essen had thought that Meike, as a well-bred young woman, ought not to read at all. It will only excite your mind, dear, but should instead busy herself with embroidery. Meike, however, had always preferred books to busy work, particularly work which involved needles, and she found herself returning to stories time and time again whenever she needed a break from her own dreary life. Meike had read all manner of books over the years, but she preferred adventure stories full of mystery, intrigue, and, yes, even murder. Meike knew from her reading that vampires were nocturnal creatures, often aristocratic, who shunned the sunlight, dwelt in ruinous castles, and supped upon the lifeblood of fair maidens. Yes, Meike thought, in an oddly detached manner. That did make sense. She had sensed there was something strange about Magdalena when first their eyes had met. Meike's blue, Magdalena's shocking scarlet. Magdalena really must have been a vampire. It all made sense. At least it would have had Meike been a heroine in one of her novels. But life, Meike reminded herself, was not akin to a story. Meike might have consumed books like a starving man, but she had sense enough to know that the words written within the pages of adventure stories were all skeins of fiction. Vampires ought to have remained within the realms of make-believe. They had no business walking about as humans did, made of cold, unfeeling flesh, with hearts which no longer beat. They were supposed to be constructs, mere figments of fancy. But Magdalena was real, undoubtedly so. Unless, Meike thought, striking her head had addled her, and unsettling though she was, Meike did not take her for a liar. Her confession had sounded quite sincere. Yes, that is correct. I am a vampire, and this castle is my territory, that and the woods that surround you. You wandered into my domain, you hopeless little lambs, while on the run from those awful bandits. I know none of this is your fault, and I've no quibbles with you. I'm not blaming you for what occurred tonight. There. See how fair I am? I'm too nice by half. Too nice for my own good cause. You've been awfully surly with me, the both of you, but I've only ever been polite. I would even let you go if I could. Dispatching of brigands is one thing, but I take no pleasure in harming young ladies. But I fear that would be foolhardy. I cannot allow any who have wandered into my realm to leave alive. I do not want you telling tall tales. I should snap both of your necks and be done with it, but... Magdalena's red eyes found Meike's, then held them. Her smile, which hitherto had seemed so easy, faded, and once more her brow furrowed. You don't seem to be a mere peasant. Magdalena delivered this judgment softly, but something dark seemed to throb beneath her words, something sinister. I can tell from your clothes, dirty though they are, that you are from a wealthy background. Your voice and your bearing. Yes, even the way you look at me. It all suggests that you are, in fact, a lady. Would I be correct in that assessment? Why do you ask? It would be problematic for me if I were to dispatch a woman of renown. I would not want your disappearance to catch the attention of men in high places. If they were to send out a search party into these woods, it is not wholly impossible that they would stumble upon my home. I have lived out of sight from the public eye for nigh on a century, and I have no desire to invite half of Augsburg's constabulary into my home. The idea is incredibly unpleasant. Magdalena pulled a face, as a small child might when confronted with a plate of food they did not much care for. If you were really a lady, I might do well to exercise some caution. I suppose I can always spare your life and kill only this dowdy common girl. Your maid, I take it. Magdalena looked to Henny now, her lips curled into a mean smile. What do you say to that? It's not a bad trade, is it? Her life, for yours. Precious few people who find themselves in my abode are ever able to live to tell the tale. You wouldn't be one, and goodness, how many guests have I had over the years? There must be a good 200 or 300. Aren't you touched by my thoughtfulness? Silence descended in the decrepit cell following Magdalena's announcement. Stuck for words, Meike could only stare at her, her lips parted. What was she to say to Magdalena's proposal? How was she to feel? There was relief, certainly, at the prospect of escaping the cell, but Meike could take no real pleasure in it, not when it would come at the cost of Henny's life. How could she abandon her friend, who had been by her side since her early childhood? Were it not for Henny, Meike knew she would be dead already, butchered like farmyard animals, in her parents' carriage. Henny had rescued her once already from a bandit's blade, It seemed unconscionable that she should ever leave her now. Meike turned this over in her mind, worrying her teeth with her lower lip, when... Henny, no! Well, if my life's all you're after. Henny reached out, taking Meike's hands between her own, then said, "What else is there to think about? It sounds like a fine suggestion to me. Don't you agree, Meike?" "What?" Meike stared into Henny's round, soft face, her eyes vast and uncomprehending. "Surely you don't mean that. You're not all right with this, are you, Henny?" Well, it'd be a lie if I said I was jumping up and down for joy at the prospect of being eaten by a vampire. Henny's smile wavered, though she tried to maintain a brave face. "But if it's what I've got to do to save your life, Meike, then I'll do it. I do love you, after all. I'm not going to let you get hurt." Henny tried to sound brave, but Meike could hear how her voice trembled all the same. Could feel, too, how Henny's hands shook. Henny, like her, had heard the screams of the bandits' leader as they echoed through the halls. Though neither woman had seen his final moments, they knew from his cries that his demise must have been barbarous. Meike could not allow Henny to endure such suffering for her sake. She could not allow her to die. Meike knew Henny wished only the best for her, but... no. Meike spoke up, her voice surprisingly cool given the wild fluctuations of her heart within her breast. "I won't allow that to happen. It wouldn't be right. If one of us must remain here, then it ought to be me." "What? No, you can't mean that, Meike. Surely you jest." "No, I'm not. You know I have a terrible sense of humor, Henny. I hardly ever tell jokes. I don't have enough levity in me for them. I'm being very serious. You've always looked out for me, ever since I was small, not that I always listened to you. Don't you remember when we stole the keys to the mausoleum and my insufferable curiosity and crept inside?" "But of course I remember. You dragged me in after you despite my warnings. It went about as badly as expected, too. Didn't it just?" Faintly, Meike smiled, dire though their situation was, happy to share this memory, though it wasn't at all fond, with Henny. For all she knew, it might very well have been her last chance to reminisce with her maid like this. Meike knew not what the future held, but... Lady von Essen was in such an awful mood when she found out. It was quite frightening. I'd never seen anything like it. Oh, yes, she was fearfully cross. It's a wonder fire didn't come out of her nostrils. I recall that she struck you, and then when I tried to argue on your behalf, she struck me, too. She struck me so hard my ears still ring from it sometimes. God, yes, poor hen. I felt awful about it at that time. Really, I did. I didn't care about my punishment. God knows I deserved it. But you'd done nothing wrong. You'd been perfectly reasonable about the whole thing. If I listened to you, we could have avoided the furor altogether. But I was too reckless. I ignored your wishes, but you still tried to protect me. You jumped to my defense just like a knight, and you were slapped silly for your troubles. It's horribly unfair. I've dragged you into all sorts of messes before, Henny, and you've always come to my defense. You've been a wonderful friend to me throughout the years, but I can't keep relying on you. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. But Meike, I like it when you rely on me. Please feel free to take advantage. That's what I'm here for. No, I can't. It isn't right. It's long past time that I repaid you. By offering yourself up as a sacrifice in my stead? That isn't what I want. Meike, please. And he stared at her mistress, her expression entreating. I love you, but you're acting like a crazy woman. And you are the pinnacle of rationality, are you, considering this crazy deal? That is truly insane. Don't tell me you've accepted all this. Of course I've not accepted it. I'm terrified, really. See how both my hands are shaking? But one of us biting it has to be better than both of us. If I can protect you, then I must. I will. That's my job. No, it isn't. Not any longer. I'm absolving you of your duty, Henny. This farce has lasted long enough. What farce? You know what I mean. Magdalena. Yes? Magdalena looked between the two women, a coy smile playing about her lips. Have you quite finished with your little quarrel? I must confess I was beginning to feel rather left out. My apologies. I will endeavor not to be so rude in the future to my hostess. Meike dipped her head in a gesture of esteem, one not so very dissimilar to the way Henny was bidden to bob around her mother. Meike knew she could not afford to anger Magdalena. If Meike was to save Henny, she would be obliged to beg and bow and scrape. Fortunately, begging and bowing were not beyond Meike's means, even though she was a lady. She was no stranger to scraping either, having tearfully entreated her parents to reconsider her marriage prospects. She had failed on that score, but she did not intend to fail now. She knew what she must say. It seemed a stretch that Magdalena would believe her, but if she did... I fear you are laboring under a misapprehension, Lady Magdalena. Your reasoning is sound. There would indeed be a ruckus if a noblewoman was to go missing, but your application is not. I am not a lady, you see, but my companion is. Oh? Magdalena raised an eyebrow. Then you mean to say you are the maid, and this lumpen Henny here is the mistress? That is correct, yes. I know I am dressed as a lady, albeit a disgraced one, but that was part of Lord and Lady Von Essen's ruse. While traveling, they often have me dressed as a lady, while Henny, that is to say Henrique, dresses as a maid. It's a means of subterfuge, so that if our carriage were to be attacked by bandits, I'm the one who would be in harm's way, rather than my mistress. Only a truly desperate bandit would rummage through the pockets of a maid, especially when she is with her lady. What? Meike, that's... Henny began, but Meike cut her off. She was warming to her ruse, despite the chill which infused the air, and she found she could not still her tongue, not until she had delivered her whole address. Lady Henrique is the one whom will be missed in Augsburg, not I. She has a fiancé waiting for her, you know, and he is a very important man. If she doesn't arrive before the dawning of the next day, he will be certain to send out a search party for her. You would not want that, would you? Magdalena pondered Meike's tall tale for a few moments, one gloved hand resting upon her hip. As she thought, Meike stared at her, compelling her, through sheer force of will, to accept her tale at face value. It was patently unbelievable, of this Meike knew, but she need not convince a whole jury. She needed only to convince Magdalena. An age seemed to pass, during which nobody spoke, until... Oh, very well. If that's how it is, then I suppose I have no choice. You may leave my abode, Lady Henrique. Here, Magdalena dropped another effusive curtsy. If that is indeed your real name, I will grant you the chance to reunite with your fiancé in Augsburg, who must be awaiting you with no shortage of anticipation. Who wouldn't, after all, wish to dote upon a maiden as fair and fine as yourself? Your surprisingly well-spoken maid, however, will be bidden to remain by my side. Do we have a deal? Yes, I would do anything to ensure Lady Henrique's safety. Oh, most assuredly. You would not consent to acting as a decoy on her behalf if you didn't care. What a wonderful friendship you women have. It's quite special, really, particularly given the disparity in your social statuses. Now come along, Lady Henrique. It was very lovely to make your acquaintance, but now I fear I must cut our meeting short. Let me escort you to the front door. It's the least I can do for a woman of your lofty status." "What? Meike, no!" Henny cried, but in vain. Magdalena was soon upon her, her pale fingers winding tight about her wrist. "Meike, please, stop this. Tell her the truth." "I'm sorry, Hen, but..." Abashed, Meike dropped her gaze to the stone floor. Though she had given her life for Henny's sake, she found she could not meet her friend's gaze as she was dragged bodily from the prison cell they had both inhabited. The hurt in Henny's countenance and the betrayal stung far too much. "This is how it has to be." "Says who? I was willing to go along with this woman's plan, but you scuppered it up. I don't understand you at all, Meike. Why would you tell such a tissue of lies for little old me?" "Magdalena, please." And he stared at Magdalena, all while trying and failing to dig her heels into the stone floor of her cell. "Surely you can't believe my mistress. It's obvious she's lying. There's no way she isn't a lady, not with her fancy, proper way of talking. She's far, far more genteel than I could ever dream of being. Her manners are certainly more polished than your own, yes, but perhaps this comes from years of servitude. You could stand to learn a thing or two from your maid, Lady Henrique. Your fiancé won't think much of you as you are now, I'm afraid. You're speaking almost like a fishwife. Now come along, let's not argue. You will give me a headache." "But Meike, I can't leave her. Let me go." Henny cried anew, squirming now, but Magdalena's hold upon her did not loosen. If anything, in fact, it seemed to grow stronger, to such a degree that Henny screamed. "Ow!" Henny's cries echoed throughout the cell, more unbearable than those of the bandit leader during his final moments. Magdalena had not made Henny bleed, at least, but she was gripping her wrist so tightly, Meike feared she might snap it. Magdalena had strength enough, or so Meike had been led to believe, to best even a fully grown man. Henny, who was short and dumpy, could put up little in the way of a fight. The poor maid was quite helpless before her. There was nothing which could be done. Not any longer. Henny would have to leave, while Meike would remain incarcerated, in this dreary cell, alone. This was what Meike had wanted when she had spun her frankly untenable story. So why, then, did she feel so guilty? "Let go of me! Let go, I say! Meike, please!" Henny continued to protest, but Magdalena remained insensible to her cries. The door of the cell was closed anew with a metallic thud, and then Meike was left sitting upon the ground, as she had been 1 hour hence when she had woken, pale-faced and trembling, and all alone. The time passed at an agonizingly slow pace as Meike sat on the stone floor of her cell, with her legs demurely crossed. Without Henny to cheer her, the air felt colder than it had before. The shadows, darker. Magdalena had taken Henny from the cell so abruptly she had not been afforded the chance to collect her scattered playing cards. Now these cards were strewn upon the floor, upturned, red diamonds, red as Magdalena's eyes, and coal-black clubs. Meike caught the eyes of a nearby joker, his lips pulled into a garish smile, and shivered. Paranoid though she knew it was, she felt as though the card was mocking her. Meike reached out, fingers trembling, to grab the card, then flipped it over. She did not want to look at the Joker's grinning face. She did not want to think, either, about what Henny was doing or how she was feeling, and she certainly did not want to think of her own future. It would be easier to drive such musings from her mind, and yet... Though Meike tried to keep her thoughts placid, like the smooth surface of an untroubled lake, sinister queries, sharp-toothed like eels, writhed just beneath the surface. What would happen when Magdalena returned? Did she mean to kill Meike quickly, or would she make her suffer first? Magdalena had seemed to derive great pleasure from her torture of the bandits' leader, but she had said she did not care to harm young ladies. Had she meant it? Meike could only hope, if Magdalena did mean to kill her, she would do so quickly. She had suffered enough for one night. No, for a lifetime. Meike, despite her heroism, did not want to die. The thought terrified her. When she imagined how Magdalena might kill her, a blade to the throat, perhaps, poison, drowning, strangulation, she felt her skin, icy cold now, ripple with goose flesh. She did not want to be stabbed, or poisoned, or drowned, or choked. She wanted to live. Meike had read stories of knights and their exploits, but she was no chivalrous sir herself. She was a young woman, though not, as her mother might have reminded her, so very young anymore, and she had little experience of the world beyond her parents' home. From an early age, Meike had been taught to hold her tongue, to hold her thoughts, to be sweet and pretty and patient and, above all else, pliant. She was not supposed to think for herself, let alone stand up for herself. It wasn't appropriate conduct for a lady. Meike had endured 25 years as such, living only to please her parents, and her parents' esteemed visitors, and later her parents' chosen fiancé, but it had not felt like living. The only times Meike felt herself were those when she played cards with Henny, or read her books, or sat up by her window at night and stared out into the garden. Meike was 25, almost 26, but she knew nothing of the world. She knew nothing of freedom. She had never truly lived. How then was she supposed to die? She could not pass on, surely, until she had at least been afforded the chance to visit some of the places she had read about in her stories. Such dreams had been all which had kept Meike going throughout her dreary days kept indoors. She had persevered, not for the sake of her present, which she had lamented, but the hopes of a better future which waited, as she had always been sure, beyond the horizon. Now Meike feared she would never be able to reach that future. Her life was to be curtailed before it could truly begin. She would never see any of the world now. Paris and Venice and Rome would remain a mystery to her, exotic settings for stories and nothing more. She had been born trapped, and she would die thus. The only difference was it was no longer her parents entrapping her, but a monster. It was a pitiful way to bring her life to its denouement. Had her 25 years thus far been a story, Meike thought bitterly, it would have been a hopelessly dull one, full of endless waiting, but precious little doing. Waiting to live, waiting to die. Was there any difference between those two states, really, when all was said and done? No point crying about it. Meike muttered this under her breath, in the dark, for her own peace of mind. No guarantee I would have been allowed to live even if Magdalena did set me free. I would have to return to Herr Gerhardt, and we would wed, and then I would spend the rest of my days trapped in his house. I would go from being a cloistered daughter to a cosseted wife. That any better, really? It would be, Meike mused, nothing but another form of imprisonment. Walter had the money to travel anywhere, but whether he would be willing to expend these funds on little jaunts for his housebound bored wife was doubtful. Perhaps it was better this way. Meike had no life, she knew, waiting for her beyond the walls of Magdalena's castle. She had never been allowed to live as she had wanted. That being the case, she might as well die. She had nothing left to lose. There was no sense in being sad, not really, but... Meike wiped her eyes with the back of her right arm, and felt an alarming dampness against her skin. She had not expected that, but perhaps she ought to. Her heart felt like it was breaking. Why am I crying? Meike brought her knees beneath her chin once more, and, drawing her arms about her legs, tried to curb her tears. The minutes continued to pass by, each more intolerable than the one which had preceded it, until, at last, Meike was alerted by the sound of footsteps. The iron door which partitioned the cell from the hall opened with a scraping squeal, and once more Magdalena entered Meike's cell. Though Magdalena had left with an unwilling Henny in tow, she was now alone. Henny had gone. Well, well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes? How fares you, my dear captive? I do apologize for the wait. Oh, never mind about me. What about Henny? Did you set her free? Goodness me, your loyalty towards your lady is most profound. I was certain you would be inquiring as to your own fate, but no, you seem to only care for her. You really ought to worry about yourself more, given the circumstances. But I shall endeavor to allay your worries. I did indeed set your mistress free. I escorted her to the entrance of my home, then bid her on her merry way. Now, why do you ask? Do you not trust me? You've done little to deserve it, given the way you've treated Henny and I, but, oh, I'm so glad to hear it. I only hope that Henny will be all right on her own. That remains to be seen. I set her free, yes, but there's no guarantee she will be able to find her way to Augsburg. Not in the dark with all this fog. These woods are dense, and the paths are not clearly signposted. It would come as no surprise if she were to find herself lost, or else at the mercy of wild animals. This forest is fair teeming with wolves. Did you know that? Wolves? Oh yes, this forest is just as much their territory as it is mine, and they often come out at night to hunt. Bandits aren't the only things fair ladies have to watch out for. But if your lady friend is resourceful and luck is on her side, she should emerge from this trial unscathed. Let us hope that she'll be all right, shall we? Meike said nothing to this, but instead dropped her gaze, her irises fixed upon her knees. Her mind turned, not to her own indeterminate fate, but to Henny, who would now be staggering through the woods, wreathed in ephemeral fog. How far away was Augsburg? Meike did not know. She had lost all sense, not only of time, but of space. The world seemed to have shrunk until it encompassed naught but her and her cell. Being imprisoned in Magdalena's abode would spell certain death, as it had for the leader of the bandits, but Henny was not yet out of the woods, literally and metaphorically speaking. She could still meet with disaster during her attempted escape. Meike saw Henny backed against the copse of trees, their branches slender, sinister, as a pack of hungry wolves bore down upon her, their eyes glistening madly in the moonlight. But this was only one possibility. Magdalena had said Henny would need luck on her side, and Henny had that in abundance if her performance in Joker was anything to be believed. She had always been better at cards than Meike. Now, enough about Lady Henrique. She's no longer my captive, and, as such, is of little interest to me. I would far rather speak to you. To me? Yes, indeed. I've designs on you, my loyal little serving girl. I do hope you'll make yourself useful during your stay. Designs? Then you mean... Meike pressed her fingers to the base of her throat. She could feel her pulse beating beneath the surface of her cool skin, as erratic as a rabbit's caught in a snare. Do you wish to drain me of my blood? Do you want me to drain you of your blood? Magdalena tittered. How very eager you are. It's not that. Do not misunderstand. I wish only, if you mean to kill me, that you would do so quickly. I've grown sick of waiting. Oh yes, that look in your eyes is delectable. It may be more so, even, than your blood. You're so very defiant. But what is this I spy? You appear to be shaking, my poor little Meike. That is because of the cold, and not because of your fright. I was able to protect my dear friend. I've nothing to be afraid of now. Then you care nothing for your own life. I've never been afforded a life. You may take it if you wish. You wouldn't be the only one. Yes, that is the fate, so I've heard, of being a servant. You poor dear. Magdalena's red eyes softened, and for a moment Meike wondered whether she could not see a trace of sympathy upon her captor's fair face. It lasted only a second, however, before it faded, replaced instead with a wry smile. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I cannot comply with your request. For the moment, that is. I will drain your blood in due course, but I've no desire to do so now. The bandits I encountered earlier made for a more than satisfactory meal. So glutted I do not think I could drink another drop of blood. Then you mean to draw this farce out longer, still? I'll draw it out for as long as I wish until I'm sufficiently thirsty. There seems little sense in overindulging. Your blood would taste sweeter, I'm sure, than a bandit's, but that only makes it more imperative that I save you until I truly want you. Though it was Meike's death Magdalena spoke of, there seemed something sultry, seductive even, in the way she stressed her words. Meike, who was unused to being wanted, found the blood pooling beneath her cheeks despite the chill which clung to her. How would it feel, she wondered, when Magdalena brought her lips to her neck? Would it hurt? She supposed she would feel a prickling sensation as Magdalena's teeth sank into her flesh, and then... Now, won't you come with me? You'll catch your death of cold staying inside this dreary cell, and then you'll be of no use to anybody. If I'm to enjoy you properly, I would prefer to do so while your body is still warm. What? Meike looked at Magdalena, her blue eyes uncomprehending. Are you really letting me go? In a manner of speaking, yes, though I'll only be transporting you from one prison to another. As your hostess, I don't believe that these quarters are wholly appropriate for a long-term stay, especially not for a fair maiden such as yourself. You will be in my abode for several days yet, I fear, until I further need of you. Until then, I would like you to live in some measure of comfort. How unexpected. I didn't know you were so gracious. I can be. I've hidden depths, you see, much like the forest that surrounds my humble abode. I do so hate to see you shiver so. Your skin's so pale, poor dear. You and I could almost be sisters. White skin may be fitting for us vampires, but it isn't so for maidens, not even the fairest in all the land. Now please, follow me. I doubt you any real wish to stay here, languishing, unless you mean to make a further martyr of yourself. No, Meike bit into her lower lip. She was loath to accept kindness from Magdalena, but she did raise a fair point. It was cold in the cell and miserable alongside it. If she remained there overnight, it did not seem impossible that the blood in her veins really might freeze. Meike had already given up her own life, but she did not want to die a stray dog, racked with shivers. If that is what you would want from me, then I've no reason to refuse. How very biddable you are. The words which come from your mouth may be stubborn, but it seems you've experience when it comes to following orders. Of course I do. I'm a maid, like I said. Ah, yes, so you did. That would explain your servility. Part of me was hoping you might refuse so that I would be bidden to carry you. Ooh. This is fine too, it spares me the effort. Shall we? Please, lead the way. Meike dropped Magdalena a curtsy this time, taking her dirty skirts between her fingers, the pads of which had turned pink from the cold. Magdalena smiled at this display. For a prisoner, you're awfully cheeky. Then turned upon her heel after bidding Meike to follow. And with that, I think that I'm going to end this episode here for now. We finally met Magdalena. I really like her, actually. I really like Henny. and I really like Magdalena, and I'm just really looking forward to what else we can see in this game. I'm interested in it. I'm actually kind of like, okay, you know, this started out very dark and gothic, which makes sense because it's, you know, supposed to be a very dark and gothic story. But I'm actually really sucked into the story and what is happening, and I want to see more of this. I'm really enjoying myself, and I hope that you are as well. But we do need to end the episode here. Definitely a longer demo than I expected it to be, but I'm excited to see more. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one for some more Cage of Roses.